another staff member there's computer. We have Teresa Nord with the ICWA Law Center. And of course, again, Judge Fairbanks. And if we're able to get Ms. Christy Chapman logged in, we will have Ms. Christy Chapman, who is a peacemaker and attorney with the New Mexico Native American Budget and Policy Institute. So Judge Fairbanks, I'll officially kick it back to you, and we will hopefully have a smooth ride from here. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you so much. And this is Cheryl Fairbanks, and we put together a real esteemed panel who are going to help us with some courageous conversations about their experience in the system. And we're just very thankful that we can bring them into our circle and learn from them. And early on, I've met them, and as we practiced, and I was really, I would say, I was so thankful that they were willing to share their stories and help make our institutions, our systems, whether they're state or federal or tribal, that they were willing to make the system better. And we share their stories because they're real, they're happening. And we just want to thank them early on for being courageous to really help us improve how we're dealing with our kids every day. And not just our Indian kids, but so that we're doing better for all kids. And I think if we can all do that, that's going to be our gift to really unite our families and really protecting and loving our kids. And so today we're going to hear from some of the tribes. And if you all could just introduce yourself and where you're from. And I have this basket here, and I'm gonna, where it says Teresa, if you could, I have a basket and I'm sharing it. And Teresa, if you could just say who you are and where you're from and what you do. We'll start with you, and then if you could shift it to someone else, and we'll just introduce each other as the first panel round.
Well, bonjour, everyone. Beniji Wang, Mibi Ikwe Indigenous. My name is Teresa Nord, and I am a parent mentor at the ICWA Law Center in Minneapolis, and I live in Hutchinson, Minnesota. And I will pass my sage to Amanda.
Hello, my name is Amanda Martinez. I am from El Paso, Texas. I am a mother of a trimember child. And I will pass my sage to Leah.
Hi, Judge. We can't see you, but if you want to go ahead and speak.
Okay.
Christy is, our other panelist, Christy, is still not on. So
okay.
It is Amanda
Leah
and Teresa.
I know that Amanda passed to Leah. Is she on?
No, Leah's not on.
Okay. And then our other panelist is Christy Chapman, who is attorney, guardian ad litem, and she practices in state and tribal courts, and she hails from the Pueblo of Zuni, and she's also a peacemaker. And so we're having a little bit of technical difficulties, but we're going to move forward. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So one of the things that we want to ask our panelists, and we'll start with Teresa, and that is, Teresa, can you tell us your and your family's experience with Child Protective Services. Can you share your story, Teresa?
Yes, thank you. So in 2005, I got sober and was sober for nearly 9 years off of methamphetamines. And I was going to school full time as a college student, with the social work major, raising a little girl on my own, and had a back injury. And I was pretty much handed handfuls of opiates, pain medication to relieve the pain. And after 2.5 years of physical therapy and medications, I wasn't getting any better. So they they took me off all treatment. And at that time, my addict mind kicked in. Unfortunately, I wasn't given any education on what to do with an opiate addiction. I had never experienced that before. And having my addict mind kick in, I was quickly able to, obtain some medications from an old friend. And very shortly thereafter, after buying pain medication off the streets, I wasn't able to continue doing that. And that is when I was introduced to heroin. And within, I believe, 2 short months after that, I had gotten a drug charge for possession. And child protection was flagged because it was a 2nd-degree felony charge. And I was really open and honest with the investigation. And in that short period of time of the investigation, my daughter, who was 6 at the time, informed me that she had been molested by a friend of mine. And being completely beside myself, I told the investigator and was asking for help. And she, at that time, immediately removed my daughter from my care, fearing that she was in imminent harm and danger. And, going back to the beginning of the investigation, I wasn't even asked if I was Native American. There was I think a cultural bias there in the sense that I have, light green eyes, at times have pale skin, and so I wasn't even asked if I had lineage, descendancy, or tribal affiliation. And so my case never even went ICWA to begin with. And after my daughter was removed, the child protection system, seeing that because of my drug charge, I was likely going to be doing a number of years in prison. And instead of allowing me to keep my case open and work a case plan to be reunified with my daughter, they instead gave me the ultimatum of voluntarily signing over custody to her dad, or my rights would be terminated. And at that time, I had just got into prison. And, it was a really sad situation because they didn't really do the background on my child's father and recognize that he was deep into his, alcoholism and drug addiction. And it was, kind of the difference between active efforts and reasonable efforts. They weren't willing to work a timeline with me, so that way we could be reunited after my 2 years in prison. And so from that point on, they had signed over custody to my child's father. I wasn't allowed any communication or to see her. I was limited, very short periods of time where I could have conversations with her over the phone, but I didn't get to see my daughter for over 2 years. And I knew when I got to prison that I needed to do some healing from the inside out, or I was going to return. And I was terrified of the word recidivism. And so I did everything that I could to start a healing journey and to recognize what my traumas were, and really start a path of recovery. And so that's what I did. And I spent just a little over 2 years incarcerated. And when I got out, I recognized the impact of what child protection, what my time in my active addiction, the removal of my child, and the amount of trauma that was inflicted on her. And I vowed to do everything that I could turn my life around and get my child back. And that's what I did. I fought the courts by myself to get my daughter back and to prove that I was the better fit. And I was able to overturn that transfer of legal custody and regained custody of her. And since that time, I've also, started working at the ICWA Center in Minneapolis as a parent mentor and working with other families with open child protection cases. So that's in a nutshell, in a really short version,
Okay.
my story of child protection.
Thank you, Teresa, for sharing that. And what I heard you say is it's important early on to determine whether the parties before the court are Native, are Indian people, and that you didn't have that asked. And so therefore, none of the active efforts were employed to keep her family united and to give the kind of services that were needed to help remedy the situation. And so thank you, Teresa. We're going to move to Amanda. And even though it says Myrna, that's really Amanda Martinez. And thank you, Amanda. Can you share your experience or your family's experience with the child welfare services, the system, what worked, what didn't work? Can you share that? And just remind us where you're from and what capacity you're in speaking today. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I'm from El Paso, Texas. My my experience with CPS was, of course, ups and downs. I was never asked either about if my son was tribal or not. I had 3 CPS workers. I was moved around. I never got any help from them. They never explained to me like what I was supposed to do or what was best for me to do due to my drug usage of cocaine. I did need a lot of help. Me myself, I would go to UBH. It's a behavior and mental health clinic, and I turned myself in there for drugs. I ended up doing an outpatient class there for 3 months, and never once did my CPS worker check up on me nor call, nothing. So one day out of the blue, he went and he asked me for a test, and I gave it to him. And of course, I came out positive. Like I said, I was never explained like anything. All I knew was I had a case and that's it, you know? And so my test came out positive for cocaine. My son was taken away. He was taken away and he ended up with my grandma, which is the mother of my mom. And after that, he would still like ask me, you know, to drug test hair follicles, and I would do it, and at last I ended up getting changed to home safe. So I was like, I still had no clue like what was going on. I still like didn't know like what to do. Do like stay in that program? Do I move on to another program? And until the tribe came in, and they're the ones that they helped me with a program here with them. And I've just been bouncing, you know, back to back until I finally found a program that I'm still in right now. It's called Drug Court, and I've been doing good. I already graduated I graduated from my classes. Right now I'm taking my GED. I've been sober 449 days. I'm doing good, and I have my son with me. I've had him since September 13th, and I'm just trying to make up for everything now that I lost with him because I didn't have it for a whole year.
Thank you. And thank you for the courage of sharing that success and being united. And there's a lot of parallels when the system seems mysterious and all it could take is some explanation of what's going to happen. So you have a better understanding of the system. And we really applaud you for working your 149 days. That is awesome. And getting your child back. Thank you for sharing.
It's
And so we'll,
449 days.
oh, 449. Oh, wow. I heard that's a major. So thank you for that correction. And thank you for sharing. And it's those success stories that make a difference. What do you think? You know, I heard you say you were bouncing from thing to thing. And what was the one thing that made a difference to you? Someone in the system that reached out, or who reached out to make that difference so you could be resilient and you could persevere? What was that one thing, Amanda?
The one thing who reached out to me?
Yeah. Is there someone in the system that reached out to you that really helped you pivot to make the change and stick with it, to persevere? Is there one thing that stands out in your mind?
The one thing that made me like snap and be like, oh wow, I gotta do this for me, was when I was offered services with Aliviane.
Okay.
So that's an inpatient, and that's one thing that really like snapped me in my head and was like, oh no, like you gotta do this. You have to do this.
Okay, thank you. And I noticed that Christy Chapman has joined us. Christy, can you give us an example of your experience as a guardian ad litem or attorney peacemaker in terms of working with the system? Christy, are you there? Okay, good. Christy, you're muted, I think.
Can you hear me? Okay. You can hear me. Sorry. So, sharing my experience, I'm working out from Albuquerque at the Native American Budget and Policy Institute, as well as serving as a guardian ad litem with Pegasus Legal Services for Children. And first, as a peacemaker, working in a case where a mother had her child taken away. My first experience was one of coming from our own indigenous background, I guess, the experience of seeing parents before the court and having their attorneys speak on their behalf, knowing that there was something more missing in terms of parents being able to speak their voice when this case was referred to peacemaking. There was a wholeness in terms of the mother, kind of like the same scenario Miss Amanda shared, was she had issues with, her issues was with alcohol, and she had her child taken away. And fortunately, the child was placed in the home of her sister. However, there was so much tension in that, in terms of the mother wanted her child back, but the sister, on the other hand, didn't trust her didn't trust mother because of her drinking. And mother was also angry because she was tired of people making her feel like she was a bad guy. While in the court, they can't really share their story. When we did peacemaking, we centered everybody within the circle. And the thing about the peacemaking was that we we're very tough on the issue and gentle on the person. Usually in the adversarial system, it's the opposite. You're really tough on the person. And in this scenario, I want to kind of go over it real quick. Once we set the sacred space of the circle and told everybody that, we're not here because of mom's problems, yes, but we're here because of the child. And when we shared our own little, introductions of that, mom within the circle process was able to hear her sister's side of the story, like what impact it had on her sister who's raising her child. And the sister, she really told the mother that, hey, look, I have my own family and I have to raise your child too, and it's impacting my own family and my relationship with my kids. And the mother, knowing that they grew up, knowing they were family, she didn't realize that impact that had. However, on the same token, the sister taking care of the child was able to bring her husband in the circle, which you don't see often in the courts. The husband was also able to speak and share his own addictions with alcohol and how his own wife, stood by his side. And that was an eye opener for the sister who's taking in her niece, because she didn't realize that she's not there supporting her own sister who needs help. And so in the peacemaking process, we were tough on the issue, but we were gentle on the person. And that speaks volumes in terms of what Ms. Fairbanks has spoken about and what Sheldon has spoken about in terms of this trauma that, as Native people we face, and the trauma of dealing with the problems. And we actually got down to what the issue was in mom's drinking. And it was that when their mother passed away, her way of coping was to drink. And when they were talking in the circle process, it came out that the mother longed for the family gatherings, for the cooking, for coming together at feast time. And when their mom passed, that was the foundation, their rock. And once it got to that point, because believe me, before going into this peacemaking, there was a lot of tension, and a lot of tension going in, and skepticism of whether or not this will work. I was the biggest skeptic of all, but having that tension subside at the end of the peace circle, I'm kind of going fast forward. The sisters who were really angry and mad at each other, at the end, when it's all said and done after prayer, they were hugging and they were crying. And they did come to a resolution to gradually start visitation with her daughter. But to me, that was like reaffirming that our indigenous ways, our indigenous values do work. We've just become accustomed to Western influence, to where, I saw this exercise and I want to share it with you guys. And if I'm speaking too much, let me know. But if you all can do an exercise with me and just fold your hands the way you feel comfortable. If you fold your hands, I want to show you. Fold your hands the way you feel comfortable. Now, open your arms up. Now, you're going to fold your hands back, but the opposite way. And so if you fold it, for some it's a little awkward, but for others, you can do it easily. And so with our indigenous ways, our indigenous processes, because we have become so accustomed to Western influence, that's all we know. But when we value our traditional ways, our indigenous ways, we can do both. And so that has been my experience as a peacemaker in dealing with the system. in terms of a guardian ad litem, what I have seen is kids losing their identity in terms of not knowing who they are. And when they're in the system doesn't readily have available those resources for our kids, for our Native kids. I will end there and just give it back to Ms. Fairbanks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Christy. So I really heard that it's important early on to ask the tough question, is this child an Indian child? And not to skip over that. And then if the child is Indian, then that kicks in the active efforts and the treatment that's necessary to really keep that child within their cultural circle, their language, their culture, their community. And if you all share one thing that the state and tribe could do to better that communication so that we're keeping the child at the heart of the circle, because sometimes the child gets lost in this whole process. And I think that if you could share one thing that the tribe and the state could do to better the communication so that our children and our families are receiving better services. For example, one thing I noticed is if the judges just communicated with each other, or the social workers just communicated with each other, or sometimes it's just moving the meeting to the tribe and having the meeting at the tribe so people could understand what is happening at the tribe and how we are as tribal people and how we really value our babies and our children. Because often our kids are before the court and they're seeing the worst side of who we are as tribal people. So what is the one thing that you could recommend to the state or the tribe that would improve that communication between this tribe and state so that our kids are benefiting, our families are benefiting? And we'll start with you, Teresa. Or Amanda, you want to go next? Okay, let's start with Amanda.
It didn't matter, but what I would like is for the tribe to, or anybody to just have the CPS reach out to them more, because they closed my case like 3 weeks ago, and my tribal Mirna caseworker, she didn't even know that my case was closed. So like I said, like for them to reach out more, or to let them know, that the kids are tribal, something, explain to them the law.
Okay. So really understanding what ICWA is and what it stands for to protect the kids. So,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, well, thank you. So Teresa, we'll move over to you.
Okay, I have a whole list, but I'll try to keep it short and sweet. Really recognizing, like you said, the importance of ICWA and knowing what it is. And unfortunately, I feel like in my case, the county that I lived in was a small rural county, and I don't think they really see too many ICWA cases, or probably have not seen too many ICWA cases since then. And so the lack of training and the understanding of the importance of asking that first question of tribal involvement, and even when cases like the many cases that I work with at the law center, if there is immediate tribal involvement to begin with, and then the children are later found to not be ICWA approved, then automatically their cases go non-ICWA, and the tribes kind of step back. But it may not be because they're not Native American. It may just mean that they're not enough to be enrolled in a tribe. And so it does not mean at that time that the child is no longer a Native child or need cultural involvement, because those are the kids that need to be reached out to the most. And say it's okay if you're not a tribal member. We still recognize that you're a Native American, and that we love you and that we're going to help support you, and your culture and your traditions, they're important, and we want to help you learn about them. And flipping back to active efforts versus reasonable efforts. When a case goes non-ICWA, then they automatically lose the active efforts. And our families are so devastated with disparities, and our numbers that are in foster care are so high. A family cannot afford to lose active efforts and to go with just reasonable efforts. And for those of you in the attendees that aren't super familiar with the difference between active efforts and reasonable efforts, I try to really give the understanding or the example. Being active efforts is if somebody comes to you and asks you for a glass of water. You go to the cupboard, you get them a glass out, you take them to the sink, you show them how to turn on the faucet, or you take them to a water fountain and you show them how to turn on the water fountain, and you give them that glass and you show them how to put the water in that glass, and you give it to them to drink. Reasonable efforts, on the other hand, would be, well, there's the cupboard, the cups are in there, go get a glass of water. And that's, really kind of how I see in my case. I was, like Amanda, I really wasn't given explanation. I wasn't given the guidance and the support that I needed. And I really feel like, had the courts been participating with each other and communicating, and there wasn't these huge silos in place, to keep all the courts separated, that maybe the judges could have figured out a different circumstance for me, instead of making me spend prison time for having an addiction. They could have given me other services that would have helped keep my family together, and I could have kept custody of my child, and she wouldn't have went through the traumatic experiences of being removed and put into foster care and put into her dad's care, and she wouldn't be in a mental health institution today because of her suicidal ideations and her trauma. And I wouldn't be a broken mom trying to fix my broken girl. So there's
Thank you.
so many things that systems can do to work together.
And often our systems have failed us, and it's really the family that's feeling the failure. So getting us to shift over to look at systems and processes so that we can put healing processes and we can shift resources to families instead of separating, because in that separation is a trauma that you're all sharing with us, and we can feel your trauma and we can feel your pain. And I say thank you for sharing that, because often we don't feel that and it's on a piece of paper. So helping identify kids early on, not by looks, not by maybes or whatever, but really helping and asking the tough question, is this an Indian child at every part of the proceeding so an Indian child doesn't get skipped over? I hear you saying that that's important. I also hear you saying that you need to understand the system, simple explanations of what's going to happen. And how do I get treatment instead of prison is an important piece. And how do I bring my culture, my values into a treatment plan that really helps my child and me together as a family unit. Because in Indian country, we don't just think I, me, individual. We think family, we think extended family, we think community. And so thank you very much for sharing your story. And we're going to yield to Christy.
Thank you. On the active efforts front, it goes back to, we don't want our families, our children to be separated. So on that front end, if we're, during investigations, what Tara just pointed out, don't say there's some food in the cupboard. You really have to do those active efforts in terms of, okay, if we need counseling, if we need help, Are you going to help us provide transportation, because maybe we don't have a car and we can't get to those appointments. But one biggest thing that I see as active efforts during investigations is just visiting the family, checking in with them maybe every week if need be, and also while you're checking in with the family, providing those resources and seeing if they need help transportating to those places that will offer them the help that they need. If they're young parents, parenting classes. But the biggest thing though is with Native communities is the American system, of course, is very individualistic, but our Native communities, we're community and we're connected and we have family and extended family. And so active efforts as far as keeping the family together is on the front end, having peacemaking or coming to circle and bringing in those family members who will say, hey, we want our child here with us. Let's talk about it. Let's discuss it. Because, I mean, if CYFD or someone's, or, CYFD or social service, whoever, the police are coming knocking at your door, you're already inflicting that trauma, not only on the family, but on the kid. And so in terms of active efforts, way in the beginning, measures that'll lessen that trauma. A lot of times, going back to the young mother that, was using alcohol, she probably didn't have to have her child taken from her and placed with somebody else had she had received that support on the loss of her mom, and dealing with that grief. And so situations like that, in terms of active efforts, it's crucial to understand for the states and the tribes to come to those agreements. Let's say if you identify a child within the state system, let us know right away before they get taken away. Maybe we can offer something. Of course, definitely we can offer something, but in terms of let's make some agreements so that we're not forcing more trauma on our families. With that, I'll hand it back over.
Okay, and thank you all for sharing that. And I think that it's really upon the tribe and the state together to work out a better communication system so that our children aren't left suspended in a system, or our people aren't receiving appropriate treatment that really effectuates change and really begins the healing for that family. Because I think a lot of times our families are really afraid of the system and we're not able to get to the healing. And so the separation kicks in, and there's a lot of trauma in that separation that we know as Indigenous people that has impacted us for generations. And we want to stop that. We want to stop that separation so that we can all heal and the kids can live in a loving, safe, protected home. And so my next question, and could I ask Jocelyn or Tanya, how much more time do we have?
Yes, ma'am, we have about 9 minutes. Our lunch break starts at 12:45.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Between time zones, it gets difficult computing the time. So one of the things that all of us who work in child welfare, we feel this resistance to ICWA, like skipping over if the child is Indian or the family has ties to the community. And could you say two things? One is the importance of culture, language, and tradition as one. And then the second one is, why do you think there's resistance to complying with ICWA? Why does that happen after 43 years? We still have that resistance. So, Teresa, can we start with you on that question?
Sure. You know, the importance of keeping the, you know, our language first and foremost is the most important. I have never been fortunate to learn my language. You know, but when our elders pass and they take the language with, the language is lost. And, you know, for centuries, we've been kept away from our language, kept away from our ceremonies, kept away from our traditions. And just getting, you know, just in the past, 40 years have been able to, you know, be able to practice those again. And, you know, if we don't recognize the importance of teaching the young ones, that when the elders pass on, then, you know, those things are lost. I know for me, my healing journey didn't begin until I had a cultural component to my recovery. And I was taught, you know, traditional parenting, traditional ways of healing, and how I can, you know, really get into my healing journey, you know, and learn not my language, but I've been adopted a family where I've learned a lot of the language, and it helps me, you know, to not only feel connected to my culture, but also to teach my young ones. And,
Okay.
you know, I think there's a huge appreciation around that. And what was the last part of the question? I apologize.
It was, why do you think there's so much resistance to compliance with ICWA? Why? I think 3 years still in
Kind of,
compliance mode. And
yeah,
so we can move to.
pass to Amanda so she can answer some of the question.
Jocelyn, did she? Okay, we're going to. Amanda, could you? And then.
Fairbanks.
Is she? Amanda? Are you
Amanda,
able?
we lost.
This is Christy.
Christy, I don't know if you.
Can you hear
I'm
me?
hoping
I can.
trouble hearing.
If
Iceland? Can you hear me, Tanya?
Yes, now we can, Judge Fairbanks.
Okay. Okay. Can you hear Amanda?
Can you
Amanda?
hear me? Yeah, they can hear.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. What was the question again?
Okay. The importance of language, culture, and tradition, you know, as we're welfare. And then the second, why are in either choose one or the other? But why do you there's still
Me,
complying with
She was going in and out, but her question was, what is the
Okay.
importance of
To
language
me,
and culture?
the culture. Okay. To me, the culture and the language is very important. I am tribal. My son is. He is 9 years old, and really, really would like to like him get like getting these. We have attended at the tribal pandemic and seeing the dance he has told me that to do, and I tell him I'm all for whatever he wants, as you know, and I'm his support. So I would really love to learn more, you know.
Okay. Christy, can you tell us, after 43 years, why do you think there's such resistance to ICWA, and why there's still, after 43 years, non-compliance?
I think it's because they think that they know what is best for us, what is right for us, and not understanding who we are as Indigenous people, the importance of our language and culture. Language is medicine. And right now, there used to be at one point over 350 Indigenous languages spoken here in the U.S. Today, only approximately 150 remain. Estimated by 2050 will be at most languages remaining. Our culture, our type, our culture, so much that our before us have shared with us from, you know, the term time immemorial, and what they've shared with us. Yes, we've been through a lot of historical trauma, but our language and our culture, historical, that can help us continue to for generations, and important. When I take care it exposed. They want.
Okay. Out of
a lunch break. And so
okay.
I want to
Just
thank
to
the
wind up the
panelists
panel,
for. Go ahead. The sound
I
is.
just wanted to also thank the panelists. If you're hearing me, are you hearing me? One of the
Yes,
things that that I know the panelists, as we were practicing, just really focused on the importance of language and culture and keeping the child connected to his extended family and his community and his tribe, his or her tribe, because that's what makes him belong or her belong. And belonging and that being loved is really what builds on their esteem. And that's preventative to stop the cycle of our kids being removed. And I think one of the things that we wanted to end with is advice to the practitioners, and the advice, and I heard this from them, it was keeping the child at the heart of the circle. So we're really looking out at the best interests of the kids, not the system, not the tribe, not the state, or the parents winning or losing, or the ICWA worker, but really keeping that child protected and loved and cared for, and really listening to the tribal voice. Because as these individuals have said, we've been at the table, but often our voice was not listened to, that it was ignored. and we weren't able to bring our culture and our way of life into what's the best interest of the child. So I wanted to thank each and every panelist for their story, being courageous, to be agent language. We say on the bottom for making a difference.